Hey, Brittany.
Hello, Rachel.
So today I wanted to talk about a rabbit hole that I have gone down many times, and that is the whole issue of prison labor. Now, a lot of people don't think about this, but slavery is actually still legal in the United States under the 14th Amendment. A lot of people thought that it was eliminated, but there is a caveat in the 14th Amendment, and that is people who are duly convicted of a crime can be forced into slavery. That's the exception.
Explain what that means in like modern context, because I think when we think of slaves, we think of plantations and civil war type things. So what would a slave in that situation be today?
Well, in modern prisons,
a prisoner.
Yeah, they force people to work in all kinds of jobs. Now, one thing that I think is very legitimate is, sometimes they'll assign people to the cafeteria to do food service or to clean up the prison, maintenance around the prison, things to make the prison a little bit more self-sustaining. That I think is fine. What bothers me is when slave labor is used to subvert or supplant, to replace labor that should be jobs for free American people to do. And so this is just something that I keep my eye on. A lot of corporations have used prison labor instead of free labor, like Victoria's Secret, Walmart. I don't know if it's still in operation, probably so, but Walmart gets a lot of its produce from this place called Martori Farms in Arizona, I believe. And if you if you look at the images, there's still African American people out there picking crops, but they've been convicted of various crimes, so that's constitutional. I think it's crazy that it exists, and I have
a question though, real quick. So, and I only know this from watching a show on Netflix, so this may not be accurate.
Oh, what did you watch? I know what you watched.
Yeah, it's an adult show, so I won't. It's not kid friendly, but they were able to make money, but they were making like tens. It wasn't tens an hour or something, but they were making a very minuscule amount. So
like pennies,
or like $1 an hour, but they were making something, but not a lot. Would you consider that the free labor as well? Or are there instances, are all of them getting paid that small amount? Are there some where they're not getting paid a small amount?
Well, see, here's the thing. They can get paid pennies on the dollar or nothing. And all of whatever they're being paid can be directed to restitution. In other words, they can take it all and give it to the victims of their crime. That doesn't bother me so much as the incentive for companies like call centers, like companies that make electronics, to use prisoners instead of like normal people who want a job. So, think about it. Instead of paying someone minimum wage and complying with OSHA laws, which is like safety laws around the workplace, which can be quite burdensome. You want people safe, but OSHA
That's a
compliance
whole other episode.
it can be very, very expensive. And sometimes the rules make no sense. It's burdensome regulation to keep workers safe. Those companies, if you use prison labor, you don't have to worry about them calling in sick. You don't have to worry about their car breaking down. You don't have to give them healthcare benefits. That's all provided by the prison. Think about it. It's all upside. So there's a lot of temptation for companies to use this labor. And in fact, I wasn't able to find it recently. I think the story is so old that it's kind of fallen off the easy to find Google search. But There was a story in Texas of this electronics company that closed down, fired all their workers. They moved 5 miles down the road inside a prison and just began operations inside the prison using all the inmates. So all those free workers lost their job to prisoners. I think that's a problem. I think we shouldn't depend on low wage, like a slave population in this country for our economic well-being. I think all free Americans deserve a chance to have a job and work and do a good job and get ahead. And so I'm always on the lookout for situations like that where prison labor is used. I'm also
I have a couple questions go ahead. About that. So, and I think you're going to get into the difference between a private prison and a public prison here in a second. So I have another question, but we'll follow up on that later. My question would be, would you feel differently? Because I am also very pro like giving prisoners something to do while they're in there, whether that's learning a skill or like I know that there are some people who like you can get your barber's license or your hair cutting license or your paint nail, like do nails technician license while you're in prison, which is great because then you can transition into the real world. And it's very hard to find jobs once you get out of prison and get those jobs. So like skills, I'm thinking like, is it so bad for them to be earning money, even if it's a little bit of money? Because I know in the show I watched, but I think you're going to get to it with your public versus private prisons. But I know in the prison or in the show I watched, they were allowed to keep that money for themselves and put it on their books, as they called it, which is how you can like buy things in prison. But so I'm going to let the audience kind of ruminate on that, but then I want you to get into your next point because I think you're going to bring up the thing I want to talk about.
So let me just answer that, especially about the barber's license, because you can get all of the skills, but then on the outside, when you go to get your cosmetology license or whatever you need to pass a background check. And you can't because you've been in prison. So what good are those skills then if you can't get a license, right?
Some of that's changing, but again, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a whole episode. A lot of this regulation needs to go away, But yeah, I agree. There should be some amount of training for life on the outside so that they don't revert back to crime. Yes, GED, improving themselves. This isn't about,
they're not really learning a skill, I guess, necessarily if they're doing. But I do want to make sure we have time. I really want you to jump into the difference in the two prisons just to keep us on track because we could go in a million different directions.
Oh yeah. So private prisons, that is basically a private company that opens a prison and they basically get a grant from the government to take care of these prisoners. And a lot of small towns actually in the middle of nowhere actually love these private prisons coming to town. There's a lot of jobs for the townspeople, as prison guards and that's one job that the prisoners can't have is prison guard. And there are jobs that the prison brings, but then their economy begins to depend on the prison. And then what if crime goes down? And so this is the whole other thing is, do we really want to create an incentive to imprison more people?
That's what scares me right there. Yeah.
Yes. And prison labor, like there were laws against it. Like if you kind of know the lore about like after the Civil War, a lot of people ask, who's going to pick our cotton if we don't have slaves anymore? Well, and then they jumped right into chained gangs of convict labor. Convict labor became a thing right after. So that became a significant part of the workforce. And then they kind of made some changes. And then in around 86, they liberalized prison labor again to utilize the workforce that is in prison. And then coincidentally, the drug war ramped up so that we flooded our prisons with more prisoners and we became the most incarcerated country on the planet. Yeah. So correlation, causation,
and it's an incentive too we already have so many crimes, everything's a crime, in this country, that it's like when you hear about these efforts to maybe, scale back the drug war, things like this, then powerful corporations with money, why would they support that if they also own a prison where they're benefiting from it? And I also think it's just it's a really bad practice because you're letting the government is making rules that a private entity is then punishing. And so it's really scary. To me, that's really scary. And it's not something that they should be doing at all.
It's the incentives that bother me. And I'll tell you why this has come back into my thought process lately is all the deportations of the illegal workers here. And there's some back and forth as to how much of that workforce is the priority, how many illegals are actually working versus do they have like temporary work visas, like are they going to get deported or not? So I don't know. That all remains to be seen, whether we're going to have enough labor in existence. And so one thing that I'm concerned about is if we have like a significant labor shortage in those types of jobs, are they going to look to more prison labor and then thusly need more prisoners, So
that's a valid,
I'm always looking for incentives to imprison people and create more crimes and go after people who shouldn't be in prison, and also particular skills. Like what if you have a particular skill? Lockheed Martin and the military industrial complex has utilized prison labor. What if they need a specialized skill to research this weapon, but you're somebody who has a skill, but you won't work for what you consider to be an evil corporation. Yeah. But if they target you and get you in prison, then you have no choice.
Yeah.
So that's something that scares me. I guess that's a little dystopian, but it's just something that I'm on the lookout for. And I never want to see happen.
No, I think these are all really good points. And I think it goes back to an episode we had just a few episodes ago about government and private partnerships when they get together and they create a whole new beast, which is something to always be on the lookout for. But really good topic. And we'll see. Hopefully the dystopian nightmare you mentioned doesn't happen. We'll see, but we'll
I always want to be wrong about that.
We'll leave it there. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, we will talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.